Hello and welcome back to the Genesis Designs and Modelcraft workbench, and I've got another review for you here. Finally managed to get hold of the Flyhawk Dauntless. So I've been really looking forward to getting hold of this ever since I saw the first sort of release shots kicking about on the net, and I just haven't been able to get one. Nobody's had any in for whatever reason, but finally noticed the other day Vince at Models for Sale had a couple in, so I grabbed one. Now the price on this is £30, 30 English pounds, 172 Dauntless. I'll just let you digest that for a while. Here's the box. Cracking artwork, I think you'll agree. It's kind of it's quite retro, bit weird looking, I think. Actually, I don't know if that's On the side you've got some of these I don't even know what these are called, QR codes for something, I don't know, and a bit of info, mostly in Chinese. So there we go, that's the box. It's fairly large, I think you'll agree, for what's in there, but let's crack on and get in there and have a look, shall we? A bit less talk and a bit more action. So, get the destructions out of the way, and here are the kit parts. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sprues in separate baggies. I don't know what that is because I don't understand that writing. Really quite a large decal sheet, but it's also in a Ziploc bag, which is nice. Another slip, which just a bit of product information, nothing important, and transparencies. So I guess we'll start with these main bags. Nice touch. Some of these bags, not all, for some reason not all the bags, but certainly some of them are Ziplocs, which I guess it doesn't really matter all that much, but I'm kind of a fan. So this is the wings, fairly obviously. Oh, blimey, get it out of there. Okay, have a look at that. These are spectacular. So we've got a complete one-piece lower wing, 2 upper wings, fairly standard sort of layout and methodology there. But what you really need to see is this surface detail. It's very, very crisply moulded. It reminds me of ICM. So the ICM 132nd kit series, I'm a big fan of those. And I think I've remarked in a previous video that the detail's kind of chunky. It's not like super fine amazing moulding. It's not super fine amazing detail, but what there is really, really crisp, and it just works. And this is actually kind of similar. It's not the most detailed sort of wheelbase you're ever going to see, but it's really crisp and it works. And on top of that, listen, Genesis does ASMR again. That's raised rivets you're hearing. The whole thing has got raised rivets on it, or the representation of raised rivet heads. Nowhere near enough, but they're there nonetheless. And I'll bring you in a little, well, I'll bring myself in nice and close, and hopefully raised rivets throughout. The leading edge slots are just moulded as depressions, they don't go all the way through. There's no bracing inside. There's some spectacular ejector pin remnants there, but I don't think they're going to get in the way of anything. Nothing much more to say about that. The fabric control surface rib tape representation is quite comical. It's quite over the top. If you don't like it, if you sand that gently, you should be able to blend it in such a way that it will actually look quite good. But that's a bit much for me. Your mileage may vary, and that is up to you. So the next big sprue is this one. fairly obviously containing the fuselage and a lot of smaller parts, and again there's that fantastically crisp detail. It's just a delight to view. Raised rivets again nowhere near enough, to be honest. The size of that is not a hair on my fingernail, that's black super glue which I can't get off. The size of a rivet head IRL is maybe 4mm, 5mm. It's not very big. I mean, they vary, obviously, they're all different sizes, but generally speaking, the rivets used for this kind of construction are not massive. So these are over scale, and as a result, there are nowhere near as many as there would be on the real thing, but it's still a nice inclusion. I like it. Looking at the internals, you've got some very basic sort of framework stuff. There's a lot of mounting points. I suspect there'll be a bit more going on there. We'll have a look at the instructions, but unfortunately there are some quite naughty ejector pins right in the middle of all that framework that are going to have to be dealt with. They're the type that have a little raised ring of flash around them, so that's going to be a tad annoying. And the engine, check it out. It's glorious. For the scale, it's absolutely lovely. And here's your surface detail again. Now, even looking at the parts on the sprue, I can see there's a really neat touch here. Looking at the lower surface near the join here, the rivets simply stop at around about this area throughout. They actually just stop. So arguably you can ignore the fact that it's impossible to reinstate raised rivets, or virtually impossible, because there are none along the bottom to actually rub off. So it's quite a nice touch, I suppose. Alright then, let's look at these other ones. Now these are not in Ziploc bags. I don't know why there's a difference. It seems a little odd to me, but so this one has got cockpit floor, some really delightful ribbing detail on it. The pushrod tubes and sort of gearbox housing for the engine, some seat bottoms, instrument panels, radio boxes, guns, lovely stuff. And these are to do with the dive brakes, as mountings for the dive brakes. So these parts are what are going to fit into all of those mounting holes on the fuselage sides, I suspect. I'll angle it so you can actually see what I'm on about. Cockpit floor itself there. Again, there's some big nasty ejector remnants. It's probably as well to trim them off just in case they get in the way of anything. Let's just bring that in. Have a look at the included detail there. It is rather lovely, and potentially this isn't up to the standard of maybe the latest Edward when it comes to included detail, but I don't think you can argue that it looks pretty adequate. This little bag has got the propeller. Very crisp again, just like the rest of it, but those sprue stubs are going to be awkward to clean up. And some of the dive brakes, which a little bit of flash on the end of that and that, a little bit of flash on the end of them, but again they've got raised rivets. The holes are already drilled, and then there's framework on the back of each one. They look absolutely lovely. And finally we've just got these two one piece front cowl. There is a raised mould seam just around the front edge of that, but that'll be an easy thing to clean up. There's also a beveled edge at the back, pre-beveled, to give the appearance of a thin edge, which is a nice touch, and something that not everybody's doing even now. We would go for the rest of the dive brake parts. Similarly, raised rivets on the outer face and framework on the inner, and again there is flash, but they're very, very thin trailing edge wise, so I suspect that's probably why. What's here? What we got here? Machine guns and cowl flaps and a couple of very small parts. It's absolutely beautiful. The moulding is absolutely beautiful. It's the first Flyhawk aircraft kit I've seen. I think it's probably the first aircraft kit they've done, certainly in a normal scale. But I do have a ship kit by Flyhawk in 1/700th, and I've never seen anything like it. The tiny, tiny parts and the crispness and fidelity of the moulding of them is just something to behold. It's absolutely phenomenal. So we have here a single windscreen part and a single windscreen part, and then we have options. So that's a closed canopy, and these are the parts for an open one. And they're just probably a landing light lens or similar. They're not amazingly clear. Just a little bit. I can see sort of swirl marks from the moulding in them, and a couple of what, to be honest, look like swirl marks in the tool, or perhaps some marks left over from cleaning or prepping the tool. I'm not sure. They're not terrible though. The frames are raised and they're also textured, so makes them quite easy to see here. And they're not stupidly big, they're not stupidly thick, should I say. Yeah, they're okay. Possibly not quite up to the standard of the rest of it. The instructions are quite interesting. Anyone who's seen a Flyhawk kit before may be familiar with this, but they actually just come in the form of a long banner. It's in colour, it's quite nice. It starts off with a parts map and a decal sheet diagram, and then it goes through construction thus. I'll keep that still. There we go. So I really like the diagrammatical style here. It's really very, very clearly drawn. There's a lot of information there, but it's not overwhelming to digest, because of the way it's been drawn. It's really easy to follow. I like the use of colour as well to highlight the part that they're actually looking or talking about, which is quite interesting. Don't appear to be at this point. There are no colour call outs on these parts, which is a bit of a departure from the norm. Coming around to the rest of it, and you can see that the diagrams are very complete. You know, this here, all of the rivet detail and panel line, everything's on there, so it makes it look terrifically busy. But because of the clear way it's drawn and the use of colour, it's still very easy to follow what they're trying to tell you. So again, no colour call outs. And then we get to the part which deals with the colour call outs, and this is again a bit different from the norm, I think you'll agree. So the decal sheet is really large, but it doesn't tell you, there aren't separate drawings for each scheme, shall I say, because there is only one scheme. It's basically this scheme. So grey blue over light grey, that's it. It's the only scheme offered. So this huge decal sheet comes into play by offering all of the serials for VB3, VB6 and VB8 bombing squadron. It doesn't say what ship that's from. Maybe someone in the comments can enlighten us. But the information is only written here. So essentially, here's the scheme. Just choose the number you fancy, really. The decals themselves are extremely thin. I've not used these before. I've not used any Flyhawk decals. I don't know how they are. They look to be quite well printed, and they have a satin finish on them, which I prefer to a matte or even a full gloss finish actually. As you can see, there's a little bit of stencils here, national markings there and walkways, and then it's just a buttload of serials, so just pick the one you want. And then for the internal colour callouts, it's all in this area here. So rather than being throughout the booklet previously, it's just this bit here, and it's coloured in similarly to you know, colour wise to what the model will be, somewhat anyway. And the colour callouts themselves are through the Mr. Hobby, so that's the Aqueous, Aqueous guns or Tamiya acrylics. So that's a little bit different. I like it. It's not bad different, but it's definitely different. So I reckon, having looked at how beautiful this moulding is, and they do look stunning on the sprue, I think it's only fair that I snip them all off and tape them together, don't you? Why not? Let's snip it up. Snip it up and start again. So. And here we are, all trimmed up. Let's see how this thing fits together. So I'm going to use 10mm tape, which might seem excessive, but I've made it a hobby of mine to be buying 10mm tape refills lately, because I thought I'd run out of them. And I did a tape drawer audit earlier today, in fact, and I've got about 8 10mm tape refills and no 6s. So I've been going wrong there, haven't I? Anyway. Enough. Right, let's see how this thing goes together. So all I've done is the usual. I've just basic trimming with a scalpel. Comments from basic trimming with scalpel. There is, as there always is in these modern kits, it seems, and some are worse than others, but the mould seams are along the corners of parts, and in a few areas here they're somewhat prominent. I always say this, I don't know if you can see, but the screen I'm looking at is really small. But hopefully you can pick up that sort of little edge along the back here. It's not a big deal. It'll swipe off in no time. You can just scrape it or trim it off with a scalpel blade in a matter of seconds. But it is there. It could influence the fit of the part. And if this area were silver or certain colours, it would be quite visually obvious. So it's worthy of comment. It's not a complaint, but they're there. So, as I say, no other prep. I've not flattened any of the joint areas or anything like that. I have literally just trimmed off the sprue stubs, and I don't video it because I feel like nobody needs to see it, you know. Okay, so basically good. It's not perfect, but it's decent. A little, well, I'm not going to put the dive brakes on anyway, so it's not, I'll just tape straight across the back of that. There we go. Alright, so at the back here, trailing edge of the, have I just done all of that off camera? God, I'm useless. At the back edge here, there's a very, very slight gap, which you can't press together. In fact, when you press it, you make it worse. The reason that these type of gaps come to pass it's just the fairness in here. So a couple of moments spent scraping and sanding just in here, getting it flat towards that trailing edge. In fact, I can see a little taper there. We'll get rid of that gap before you even start. Parts cleanup is still a thing, even now. These modern kits, as beautiful as they are, they do still need cleaning up to be at their best. Yeah, this side's the same, and it doesn't quite fit around here. The lower half of the trim tab is moulded inside the upper half of the wing, and it doesn't quite match up with the aperture in here, so that will need a little trim just to get it perfect. It's a very thin area of plastic, so this is the kind of thing that if you added liquid cement, you could kind of mush it until they fitted. But you run the risk of distorting the whole area because the plastic here is so thin. So I would say, you know, take it apart again and just trim that aperture slightly till it fits properly. But you can see how that is not, it's not flush, and it's because it's catching on this outboard edge. So there's our wing together with built-in extreme dihedral. Very nice. Now, fuselage halves. There was a tiny bit of flash in the area here where the front of the wing will sit later. Again, just along the edge of the parts, the same thing. It's just that sort of little bit of mould seam action. This immediately drops together quite nicely. I'll show you this lower seam, and hopefully you can pick out there what I was talking about with how the rivets simply stop and don't carry on across that joint. And this has such a large area cut away at the top here for the cockpit. You could forgive it for being a bit floppy, but it's not too bad. Here, top of the fin, there's just a very slight impediment from that aerial tip. Doesn't quite work. There'll need to be a little bit of trimming somewhere. A little bit of shuffling around to get that just right. It's nothing major though. And I'll just try and put a piece of tape on the inside here because there's a load of sticky out stuff underneath that's gonna, I can't put tape onto it. The tweezers, where are you? There we go. Not got it super tight, but it's in. So that's gone together absolutely fine. No issues with that at all. There is a locating peg just on the top of this sort of rollover bar piece. Let's see what happens when we try to fit the wing. Bearing in mind the instructions appear to show, yes, that they want you to fit the lower wing and then add the uppers. So that's why that clicking just happened. Okay. It's not too bad, but it's not spot on. There's quite a gap there. But let's not jump to conclusions on that one because there is no interior, and if I put my finger inside, it pushes together absolutely beautifully, and there's no sort of irregularities, or yeah, that goes together just fine. When oh god, this is really awkward. See how that's just from putting the finger in. So I think that addition of the interior here is key to getting that just right, because the interior will hold the fuselage at whatever width it needs to be at, and if it doesn't, it's always going to be possible just to introduce a stick or something, you know, skewer stick type affair into here and just push it out to get a good fit if you need to. Underneath, at the front, no dramas, just that looks like a factory seam. Well, I would be happy to leave that as it is. The back here, this aft part of the wing is sticking down quite substantially, needs to be pushed up, which is no issue, you can push it up. But it doesn't fit tightly, there is a gap. And on top of that, there's a mould seam right here, running sort of adjacent to that joint, so all of that needs to be smoothed out. And it's going to be awkward to avoid damaging these circles. These kind of things are very personal. Many modelers might be quite happy to just glue that in as it is there, maybe a smear of Mr. Surfacer, leave it at that, and others won't be. It's your choice, guys. I would need to clean this up personally, but that's me, it's my choice. Let's get some tape on here. Please excuse the sniffing, I'm so sorry, I am still recovering from COVID. I'm testing negative now, it's gone, but the after effects are lingering and not particularly pleasant, honestly. It wasn't a lot of fun at all. But you know, I wasn't hospitalised and I'm still here, so there's no point complaining about it now. There we go, that's that all together. At the front here then you've got, let's get that tape back out of the way. This is sort of the firewall, plus a bit of upper gun decking, and that drops on spectacularly well. I'm going to have to use some of that precious 6mm tape though. Get another order in quick. So this piece has the sort of upper deck guns moulded into it as well. They're not hollowed out or anything on the ends, they're quite basic, but they're only just visible really. That's that one there, and then there's also this little upper deck piece which fits behind that. Which appears to be very slightly wider than the fuselage at this point, but again, without the internals it's difficult to really jump on that, and it doesn't look super unsightly actually. If you just ran liquid cement along there, just wouldn't look too bad, I don't think. It's not terrible. It's difficult with kits like this where they are a little bit bitty, a little fragmented in their parts breakdown. It's difficult to be too judgmental because the fit and the gluing of one part always seems to affect the next, and without everything in there you can't really say that it's too wide, because the fuselage does spread quite happily to meet it. The cowl then sits on the front of this, obviously. It's got two little pegs that locate it in. in place on the front there. Tell you what, let's go for some 5mm tape, shall we? There we go, and that's the cowl on. Awesome. And the final part of the puzzle then is these tail planes. Now, there was a big ejector flash sort of sticking up on there. I've just trimmed it off with the number 15 blade in the scalpel. So obvious that it shouldn't be there that it's barely worth mentioning, honestly, but you never know. So these have got this delightful little window with a peg that sits in it to locate this inboard end, the tab. They pretty much just squeeze together really, really nicely. No issues there whatsoever. And I assume, yeah, just tab in. Done. So you could probably tell from that slight struggle, the tab's exactly the same length as the slot, so you have to get it just right to get it to drop in. But drop in it does, and that's what we're left with. So I reckon that's pretty impressive. It is a slightly complex part breakdown around the nose especially, so it, you know, there's plenty of excuse for it to not really fit. But it does. And look how much it looks like a Dauntless. Isn't it cute? I do like the Dauntless. It's a plainly handsome machine. One thing I did forget to mention in the previous part of the review is this rather delightful mask set, which is included in the kit also. It's just a little print off general arrangement showing you where the masks actually fit, but they're laid out on this, they seem to be laser cut. They're laid out on this sheet in the order that you'd fit them onto the Transparencies, so it should be fairly obvious in practice. I'll bring that up for you. Very, very nice looking, obviously kabuki tape. And there's a bunch of strips along the bottom too, which I think are just for general use. Number 7. Let me just quickly check the instructions in case there's anything on there. There isn't, they're not mentioned on the instructions. So there you go. The Flyhawk Dauntless. This is the early version, the SBD-3. I'm actually kicking myself a little bit. I perhaps should have waited, because maybe they'd have brought out an SBD, or will bring out an SBD-5, and I do like the Atlantic scheme, the grey over the white. But nonetheless, this looks a beautiful little kit. So, to go back to the beginning, I said it was £30, and I feel like a lot of people might say, gosh, £30 is a lot for a 72nd scale model. And I can't disagree with that. It does feel like a lot of money for a 72nd, small 72nd model. But I think the key with pricing is not to think about the size of the kit or the size of the model or the scale even of the model, but to think about the complexity and the moulding of the model. There are a similar number of parts in this kit, a similar level of detail as you would find in a good 1/48 kit of this subject, and you wouldn't expect to pay any less than £30 for that. I think that the size of the plastic parts is virtually irrelevant in the cost, to be honest. Just my opinion, don't kill me for it. But I think, yeah, it's the way things are going. The trouble is, for Flyhawk, that Edward and Armour Hobby exist, because they're producing kits that are every bit as good as this, every bit as detailed. They fit beautifully, but then they're not £30. And they both tend to include etch as well at the higher level of pricing, but they're still more like £20 than they are 30. So it is at the expensive end of the scale, potentially and muchly because it's brought in from Asia, maybe, I'm not sure. So it is a bit expensive, but it's a lovely subject. They've done it justice. I think it won't fall together and be a super easy build, but it's not going to be a difficult build by any means. I've seen a few finished examples and they certainly do look lovely, so I think if you can stomach the price, then go for it, grab one, and you should enjoy it a lot. I'm unfortunately not going to get the opportunity to build this on the channel anytime immediately soon, because I've got a couple of fairly big projects coming up next, but I do hope to do it at some point, because I think this one deserves looking at. Anyway, there you go, the Flyhawk 172nd Dauntless SBD-3. As I said, I got this from modelsforsale.com. Do consider giving them a look for your next purchase. They offer decent prices and good service. Finally, buy me a coffee. If anybody wants to support me or the channel in any way, I will provide a link below for the Buy Me a Coffee app. You can log into there and buy me a coffee. Basically, you don't get anything for it except a warm fuzzy feeling, because I'm not going to put a paywall in place. But if you do want to support me, that option is there for you to do so. So with that said, it only remains for me to say, until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.